this very often. In fact, I never do this. I'm not doing this right. Thank you. All right. I don't speak in public. I just don't do this. Mostly because I don't know how to use a
Betsy,
microphone.
speak louder, please.
Yes, I will. I have sons. That's why I was able to pick out the girls that are going to speak tonight, the ladies, the women, without any sense of, oh, she's picking her favorites. These are the women I know. And I hope for the future that you will think about your own daughters and granddaughters and daughters-in-law. These women are amazing. When I said to the board, your children are changing the world, they looked at me like I had 6 heads. What are you talking about? They're changing the world. You do not have to find a cure for COVID. You do not have to invent the internet. You do not have to do 101 things that people do loud and in public. You can do them in your own life. And these women have, by their choices, no matter how busy they are, or no matter where they began, have chosen to do things that are changing the world. When I told them they were changing the world, they looked at me like I had 6 heads. But they are. They make time to help us reinterpret the world and to see what can be done in your own little corner of the world. You don't have to change everything all at once, ladies. All you have to do is change your own little corner. So, without further ado, we are going to begin with the Meltzer dynasty. When I asked Estelle what Stacy does, she had no idea. So I asked Stacy, what's your title? And she said to me, I am Chief Revenue Officer at Brightside, the leading global digital health platform for life sciences. What does this mean? No idea. Revenue means money. That's all I get. But she has a family. She is a daughter. She travels all over the country. And yet she has taken the time to be on the board of Jewish Family and Children's Services. And that is amazing. Because you have, there are only 24 hours in a day, Stacy. Did anybody ever tell you that? So.
It's quite an honor, actually, to be invited to speak here tonight and to share a little bit about my story and to be surrounded by such inspiring women. You all do amazing things, every one of you in this room, so I'm very proud to be here tonight. So when I was growing up, there was this famous ad campaign. Maybe she was born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. Well, for me, I was born with it. I can tell you, I come from generational philanthropists. I grew up in a family where this was the most important thing. So as you know, I am the daughter of Ira and Estelle Meltzer. And so for my entire life, my parents set an amazing example. I grew up going to B'nai B'rith meetings and REGM meetings and synagogue fundraisers, and of course, Hadassah. My parents were also born with it. I'm a proud 3rd generation lifetime Hadassah member, and my daughter Taylor is a 4th generation. She has the bear to prove it. But my grandparents were always involved in the synagogue. My grandmother was a Woman of the Year for Hadassah. So we celebrated these things in my family a great deal. There's a funny story in my family that my grandmother, my father's mother, never knew how many people to set the Seder table for. Because undoubtedly, my grandfather would bring home all the strays that he found in shul that night, so that everybody would have a place to be. So quite honestly, for me, it's genetic. Often, when we think about philanthropy, we think of dollars, right? We say, we're gonna give money. And believe me, it's very important to fund our organizations and to fund our organizations that we believe are worthy of our money. And they can't do it without our money. But seriously, that's not the only way that we can participate. We can also give intellectually, and we can give physically, and those things are equally as important. So as Betsy told you, I am the Chief Revenue Officer of Bright Insight, where I lead an international team selling regulated digital health solutions to the life science industry. What that means is we use technology to improve the lives of patients who are living with diseases. So if you have an app on your phone or a website that you go to, we work with pharmaceutical companies to reach out to patients to try to improve their lives through digital. I also, and believe me, what I do for my work, it's very important. It's very full-time, and it's very rewarding. I'm also, as Betsy told you, a wife, a mother, and a daughter, my most important jobs. But when I look at my life, I think that there has to be more than that. Many times over the years, because I've always worked pretty full-time, people have often said to me, why you? Why are you volunteering? Why are you the one leading this project? Why are you the one doing this? Well, there's a couple reasons. A, because I can. B, and more importantly, because I need to. I need to because when I do these things, I get more than I ever give. For me, my life has to be more than about getting up and checking my email and going to work every day. It has to be about what I can do for others and what I can do to give back. So we do things in a physical sense. We show up. We deliver Meals on Wheels, Mom, right? My dad becomes, because he's an accountant, becomes the treasurer of the men's club at Temple because we want to give back intellectually. We want to use the skills that we've been given to do things to better our community. Because my life has to be more than just work. So because I do have limited time, it means I have to make some tough choices about how I spend that extra time. I find those extra hours somehow. So I've made a couple of choices. One of them to be on the board of JFCS. When I first joined this community a little over 20 years ago, I became very involved in Federation, which is more of an umbrella organization over all sort of the Jewish organizations in our community. And I spent a lot of time there, and I became president of the women's division, and I was very proud of the work we did there. But I never felt close enough to the people that we were serving. So when you work for an umbrella organization, you talk a lot about allocations and where the money goes and who gets what. But I never felt like I could really touch the people and see the impact that we could make on someone's life by volunteering. And so I got involved in JFCS because JFCS mission was something that was very dear to me. So what is JFCS about? It's about feeding our community. It's about clothing our community. It's about counseling our community. Those were things that spoke to me. And when I worked for JFCS, and I continue to work for JFCS, I felt like I could get close to those people, and I could see the impact that we could have on people's lives. So when you go and you deliver Meals on Wheels, and you're potentially the only person they may have seen or spoken to the entire week, you feel it. Like, you really feel it. You feel that these people need some human interaction. They need someone to speak to. They need someone to care about them. And I love that about that. I shop for a family every month and bring them food that they couldn't get otherwise. So you feel that. And so JFCS has become something very, very dear to me. The other thing I spent some time on is around organ donation. I have a dear friend who needed a kidney transplant recently. And so we started an organization to go and find him a kidney transplant. We work with an organization called Renewal that helps match altruistic donors to people in need of kidneys. And luckily for my friend, we found him a kidney. And in August, it'll be 2 years that he's living with his new kidney that came from a completely altruistic person who had never met him and only did it because he, as a Jew, also felt that he needed to find another way to give back to his community. So with that, I thank you for letting me share my story. But if I can tell you the best way that I'm improving the world, is I've raised these two gorgeous, fully formed adult human beings, Sam and Taylor, and they're my greatest gift to the world. So thank you. And
I'm Lyra Tooleman. As I was described, I am the Education Associate for the Learning Through Art in School Youth and Family program at the Solomon Art Guggenheim Museum in New York City, which is part of the Guggenheim Constellation, which includes 4 different countries. United States, where we have our main flagship location, and Bilbao, Spain, where we have our Bilbao collection, which is mainly Spanish artwork, the Peggy Guggenheim in Venice, and a soon-to-be-opened Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, which we will also be opening the Learning Through Art program. My main job when I first started was with the Learning Through Art program, but now I kind of encompass multiple different things. But as I was also described, I went to college kind of not knowing what I was going to do. I started out wanting to be a shark biologist. So I wanted to research sharks and go swimming with them and swim with dolphins. I still want to do that, I'm kind of mad that I can't. But I wasn't particularly good at math. So after failing pre-calculus in college, my mom made me switch to my minor, which was art history. And it was always kind of more of a comfort zone, was art, because my grandpa was a professional artist. And when I was in school, most of the time I got, what are you gonna do with an art history degree? And I said I would work in museum education. And everybody said, oh, okay, that's nice. Yeah, you're sure you are. And I spent an entire year after college working at multiple different institutions for free, being paid nothing, and traveling to New York City every single day, as well as substituting in the East Windsor School District as a teacher. And finally landed my dream job on July 5th, 2017, where I have been ever since at the Guggenheim Museum. So as a daily job, mainly I work with organizing anything to do with school programs, so kindergarten through 12th grade. So anybody in that age range. Every so often I get to work with college students and other ages, but we have multiple other departments that work with the education in those age groups. And my job is essentially to organize school trips for school students. They come to New York City's one of our biggest museums, and actually New York City public schools are currently fully funded by an anonymous donor through the rest of the school year, so everybody gets a free tour. And then the pride and joy of our school department is the Learning Through Art program, which is in its 51st year. We just celebrated our 50th year last year, and it was started actually with the assistance of Keith Haring and Paloma Picasso. So they both generously donated in order to create something that at the time when it first started was called Learning to Read Through the Arts and has now developed into Learning Through Art. Essentially, the Learning Through Art program is a 20-week residency where we hire what we call teaching artists, which are people that are artists in their own right, and they kind of create art on their own time, and then they teach in our schools. We hire about, I think this year we have 12 of them. We have 16 residencies across all 5 boroughs. I personally represent 3 different boroughs, so I work with 3 schools individually and 3 teaching artists. So I work with PS 48 in Staten Island, and my teaching artist there is named Diane Mathias. I'm just going to tell their names so that you can Google them because they need more press for their art also. And I work with Laura Kelly at PS 145 in Manhattan and PS 130 in Queens with Ozzy Amiri. So all 3 of my teaching artists go into the schools on a weekly basis and kind of just be an art teacher. So they work with one entire grade residency. My age range is generally 3rd grade, so all 3 programs are 3rd graders, so 8 and 9-year-old individuals. And at the end of the year, after 20 weeks of working with their teaching artists, they actually have an exhibition in the museum. And that will be opening this Friday. On Thursday, we have our annual gala, which we're preparing for right now, which is us actually going in. We have students that we bring in from all of the schools, and one student represents every single residency and comes to the museum and presents their artwork to all the fancy people and all of the people that donate and fund us every year. So on Thursday, that will be our celebration. And if anybody wants to see the program, we open on Friday, the 13th, and we end on June 2nd. But mainly, our program offers art to students that wouldn't have it. So every single one of the schools either has a very limited art program or has nothing whatsoever because art was defunded recently in New York City. So it's one of the things that was lost. Gym classes have risen in importance and they have a lot more of them, but we don't have as many art and music. So this gives them the opportunity to learn the basics of art, painting, drawing, pastels, so on, and create and kind of learn about opportunities in art as well as being exposed to the museum itself. Most of these students are from underprivileged backgrounds. They don't have a lot of resources. Almost all of them come from a school that has free lunch, and 70% of our students are actually sometimes considered below the poverty line. We have a good portion of our students that are homeless, and so this is an opportunity for them to come to a place that they've never been to before. The students are required to come to the museum an average of 3 times per year. Fortunately, this year we haven't been able to do that because of COVID, so we have very different requirements, but we're offering virtual tours for them, and those are led by Zoom, and they just kind of go on a little tour through the museum with the art teachers that we also employ. And when they come to the museum, a lot of times we get like the big wow moment when they first walk in. If everybody's familiar with the Guggenheim looks like, it's the big circular one that's right on Fifth Avenue, and it looks like a seashell on the outside. And when you walk into the first area, I'm usually standing in the back corner with these big ugly bins for them to put their backpacks in. But they ignore me and they just kind of look up. Because we have this thing called the Rotunda, which is this gigantic open air location that stretches up about 6 stories, and it's just a wow moment. And most of these students have never been to an art museum or any museum before. So we like to think of it as offering kind of a great opportunity for them. We have several students that have actually come back as alumni to tell us that they've become workers in art fields. And recently, in the last few years, we actually had one of our students from the first year of our program found us online and was able to come back and visit this year's exhibition. So the exhibition opens this Thursday, so we're a little stressed out at this time. But so mainly what the exhibition offers is for the students to actually say that they've presented their artwork in the museum. It ranges from 2D artwork to video artwork to claymation. Sometimes we have sound installation pieces. And this year, the majority of things are 2D works because it's a lot easier when you're doing kind of sometimes hybrid work and sometimes in school. Unfortunately, it has been very difficult to lead this program while we've been dealing with the pandemic. But we were successfully able to hold exhibitions every single year during the entire time of the pandemic. And this will be our first year back in person. All of my artworks are the ones for my programs. 2 of them are 2D and 1 is 3D. And all of these programs are based on kind of an essential question. So at the beginning of the year, the teaching artist is expected to come up with something that dictates the entirety of the program. Most of the time it's something to do with emotion. My main themes for my teachers this year were mostly social and emotional learning based. So they were like, how does emotion affect what we learn about art? How can I express myself through art? And something similar to that. So they came up with these very colorful pieces of artwork. My favorite one is from PS 130 in Queens, which is essentially 2 different self-portraits, and they're made on a poster board piece and then interlocking to create this kind of 3D effect where it has 4 different faces. They're able to walk around and around, and all of them are painted to look sort of like the children, and they have different color schemes, and the colors are supposed to represent the emotions that they felt through the pandemic and all of the different experiences that they faced with that. But mainly my program is just offering kids something to do in the museum. We have a lot of other offers that we have as well through our department. We have school partnerships, which are multiple session programs that we also offer. There's some schools that are also the same schools that we work with are offered these as well for extra funding, and they have similar things where they will have multiple after-school programs for free or before-school programs for free. Other things where our teachers will have them come on site for programs, and they'll go on visits to other museums. We have several other programs that we offer. One that's my particular favorite is called Find the Forgery, which is which is like learning to pretend that you can figure out what the fake artwork is. But I was just told to cut off, so I'm just rambling. But that's it.
Like Betsy said, I'm a midwife, and I've been involved in helping women give birth for now maybe 23 years. So really ever since I kind of grew up and became an adult, the first time I got turned on to midwifery, I was 18. I happened to have been living in a tent in Maine at the time, but that's for another story.
Don't you want to hear more?
No. So I was asked here today to talk about how I came to do this and the reason why I do it. So I'll start by asking you a question, and you don't have to raise your hands, but you can think about it in your head. How many people here who have children remember at least one thing about the day they gave birth? Okay, you don't have to tell me what it is. Okay, now if it was a negative thing, how many people remember that it was a negative thing? Okay, hopefully not. Now how many people remember, obviously the birth of a child is a positive, but in your day and age, when you were giving birth, there was probably a lot of negatives that went along with birth, because unfortunately, as you know from watching Call of the Midwife, we are in a place right now in history and in American history, we're trying to bring birth back to women. So talking about midwifery at a Hadassah meeting is very apropos, because this organization is really all about women who do and women who are changing the world. So midwives are women that are trying to change the birth world and the world. That's okay. I have 5 kids. I'm used to distractions. It's fine. Midwifery is really about trying to change the face of midwifery and trying to change the experiences that women have. So unless you yourself, right here, were born via cesarean section, you have a history that goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of women who were able to give birth. Because 200 years ago, if they weren't, they died. So unless you were yourself were born via C-section, which is totally fine, that's a great thing we have in the world, then you have this lineage of women that were also able to give birth. But right now in this country, the cesarean section rate is 34%. That means 1 out of every 3 people in this room, if they were giving birth today in the American U.S. hospital, would have a surgical birth. We also, we have this great American healthcare system. Well, not the system, but we have the technologies and life-saving tools, but we rank one of the highest in maternal and infant mortality of the developing countries. And Black women in particular are 4 times likely to die in childbirth. So the question then becomes, what are we doing wrong in this country? Well, there was a famous doctor who once said, the problem that we have in this country is that we're missing an essential ingredient in the birth room, and that's the midwife. Because midwives see birth as a normal, natural process that needs to be nurtured and cared for, and sometimes needs to be rescued. And so we're trained to rescue, and we're trained to recognize when there's a problem and how to deal with those problems. But more so, we're trained to how to nurture women and how to care for women, how to empower women and let them know that you and your body were created to do this. Now let's remember how we can do this in a way that when you look back on your birth experience 45 years from now, when you raise your hand, you will remember that this was an empowering experience. So how do I know that this can be an empowering experience? Well, when I first started doing birth work, I wasn't a mother. I was only 21 years old and I hadn't had any children yet. But I read a book called Spiritual Midwifery. And that book was written by one of the pioneering midwives of our country. Her name was Anna Mae Gaskin. And she still is alive today. She's probably in this age range here. And I saw through her book that birth was not just something to get through. If we think about what happens when we give birth, is what are we doing? We're bringing a soul into the world. And we're being partners with God. So how can it be that if we're doing something as holy and special and unique and life-changing as bringing a baby into this world, then it has to be this negative, terrible experience? So I saw through her book and then through my own eyes that it didn't have to be the way that it was for so many women. So my job then became, well, how can I create that change? How could I be the person to help other women have an amazing and empowering and beautiful experience giving birth? So that's what I started to do. I started doing work as a doula. So some people still ask me what's the difference between a midwife and a doula. A doula is just a labor assistant, someone to help a woman get through, to be an advocate for her, to help her learn how to breathe and move in labor. A midwife is a primary care provider who takes care of a woman from her first prenatal all the way through her birth and taking care of her newborn in the first couple days. So why did I start to do this? So I read this amazing book, and when my mom was asking me, she said, just tell them how you got started doing this. So like we heard earlier, that we are handed down things from our parents and our generations. And so when I think about why did I choose to do this, I think about my parents, my mother and my father. May he rest in peace. We just went to the cemetery today. And as you might know, my mom, she's very caring and she's a doer, right? She's the president of Hadassah, and she will, give you the shirt off her back. She'll, as her favorite words are, bend over backwards for
Make chicken soup.
whatever she does. She makes chicken soup. She does a lot of things for people. And my dad, he was the one that was first out the door to rescue and save anyone and anywhere that they needed to be. So midwifery is kind of like the melding of those two things. You have to be caring and gentle and giving, but you also have to be ready to run out the door at a moment's notice and go be, in that space of saving, so to speak. So I think that through my parents, I was given those abilities to be the midwife that too close. Be the midwife that I am today. So currently, I was a home birth midwife for many years. So much like you see in Call the Midwife, those are pretty true to life. I have a lot of stories of trekking over suspension bridges in the winter with my equipment on a sled, and being with newborns with new wood-burning stoves. But I also worked in the hospital for many years, and have been privileged to be at C-sections and help in C-sections and see everything from birth center births at the border of Mexico, to rural births in Massachusetts, to hospital births in Pittsburgh. And so where my journey is now is that I feel like midwifery care should be available and an option for every woman, regardless of where they choose to give birth, whether they choose or need to give birth in a hospital, whether they choose or want to give birth at home or a birthing center, that any woman who falls in the category of not being a high-risk patient who has a healthy, normal pregnancy should have the choice to have midwifery care. Midwifery care differs from OBGYN care in the fact that most midwives view birth as a normal, natural event that needs to be nurtured and supported, where OBGYN care sees it as an accident waiting to happen and that we need to rush in and do something about it. I've worked with great doctors in the past. I'm not anti-doctor, I'm not anti-hospital, but I see that midwives hold a special place, not only in the world today, but as far back as looking in the Torah, we see that in the beginning in Shemos, in Exodus, we see that it talks about the midwives. So as Jewish people, we have a really strong heritage of midwifery care. It said the midwives were special and they didn't do what the Pharaoh wanted them to do, and they saved the babies. And it also says that the women of Egypt, they were like animals, and they gave birth before the midwife had a chance to get them. So what does it mean that they were like animals? It means that they were strong and they used their own strength to give birth. So we have this heritage of being of Jewish women to have midwifery care and be empowered in our experiences. So that's what I hope to bring to women and families. Currently, I finished nursing school because I decided to go back and become what's called a nurse midwife, so that I can be a midwife in the hospital setting and help women who choose to give birth in a hospital. So I am a CPM, a certified professional midwife. I am an RN now. I'm in my Bachelor's of Science in Nursing program, and then I'll start my residency in another 2 years for certified nurse midwifery. So that's basically my story, and thanks for having me.
I think the big judgment of whether or not any piece of theater works is, did you connect with the audience? Did you convey the emotion, the story, and all of that goes with it to the audience so that they're feeling something, they're experiencing whatever it is that you hope that they're experiencing, and are they leaving just a little bit changed from their shared experience of what you gave them and what they took from it? I am Cindy Chait. I am both a professional musical theater actress as well as a local actress and theater teacher. I spent a good chunk of my childhood with my grandmother, Ruth, and we would listen to her opera albums. So I fell in love with music. She was kind of a role model, an icon for me. So singing just really was a natural no-brainer to me. So I naturally fell into musical theater, more so than theater because of my intense love and personal connection to singing. I was in a production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown in 6th grade, and as I like to say, I got bitten by the bug. I fell so in love with performing and the friendships that I made putting that show together that I was enthralled for the rest of my life with it.
So, if I put my head forward and I walk around the room like this, it feels extremely different. And notice what it does to the rest of my body. Doesn't it make me stick my tush out? Watch. Right?
Teaching theater seems like a no-brainer to me. To combine my experience as a teacher and my love for children with my love of theater seemed like a perfect marriage to me. And in this way I get to teach children and be with children, but in this way I get to just have pure joy and fun with them and encourage them to take risks and be themselves and have more confidence in themselves. And it's extremely rewarding.
I've had much good luck as a performer. I've been cast in almost every show.
Theater to me is an escape from real life. I can completely immerse myself in a different world, and I can completely immerse myself in a different person. I can get to know who they are, and I create this person, I become this person. And as someone who can sometimes be shy myself, I lose myself in the ability to be someone else. I'll do anything, I'll say anything as a character in a way that I would never as myself. The other part that is just to me amazing is the camaraderie that comes along with putting on a production. I think off the top of my head, the things that I remember most fondly are the times that we've made mistakes. I was on stage once during The Drowsy Chaperone, and the guy playing Adolfo's wig came off in the middle of a scene, and he had to run off stage, and I had to improvise on stage until he came back again with his wig on, and then we could barely get through the scene. We were laughing so hard. And that's something that he and I will always share. And those are the best, the funniest moments to me. I think there are a couple of different things about theater that have really formed who I am today. One of them is the beautiful people that do theater that both on stage and off have such an open mind about everyone being who they are. So I get to go and be my goofy self with all of them, and it's helped me be comfortable with who I am in any situation that I find myself in. And the other part of it is the skills that I've acquired as an actor lead me to be able to do all kinds of things in real life. So for example, when I was originally doing interviews for teaching, I could become the role of a teacher and really sound like I knew exactly what I was doing as a teacher, even when I was very inexperienced at the time. I think the biggest thing you learn as you get more experience is to give yourself a little bit of leeway, a little bit of grace, and the ability to fail. So something I tell my kids in my class all the time is I would much rather them try something grand and huge and funny and silly and decide that it's not right, or me tell them to pull back a little bit and make a mistake, as it were. So I allow myself a little bit more room to experiment with people that I'm playing, and for sometimes for it not to work and to figure out what I want to do with the character.
I guess I probably should have started by explaining what this video is. My son, who is recording now, is a freshman at Lafayette, and he is a double English and film major. And so this was actually a project. He was supposed to interview somebody. And he thought that I would make an interesting subject, and I was game. And so that's how this came about. So when Betsy asked me to do this, I said, wait, I have something that might be better than me just standing up there and speaking. Here you got to see all sorts of photographs and hear me speak about it in a way that he put together so beautifully. I don't think there's much more I can really add at this point, except to say, one of the things that Betsy said to me that really rang true about changing the world in your own little corner is, the theater that I do only reaches, the several hundred people, or if I'm doing plays in the park, sometimes several thousand people a night. And in my classrooms, just a few children at a time. When theater came back, after a couple of years, not having any theater in this world, and I had a choice what to do, what to audition for. And I ended up auditioning and doing Xanadu. I don't know if you noticed those were the lines I was learning, one of the scenes. And it's not a show I normally would have done. It's very, very silly. Do you guys know of Xanadu? It's based on the movies from the 1980s starring Olivia Newton-John. It's extremely silly. But to me, what I wanted to do is I genuinely wanted to give back nothing but joy right now. I did not want to do a piece of theater that is as wonderful as it is, and as great as I think it would be to do it another time. I didn't want to do anything that brought anything but joy. And the group of us that put that piece of theater together felt the weight of that. We felt that there was a more important than we normally felt about putting a show together, because we were giving back in that way. And we all, almost all of us, after opening night, cried with one another to hear the laughter and the applause and the joy brought to people after 2 years of some gloom and doom. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to share my story and allowing me to share my son's work. As a mom, that gives me nachas to be able to do that as well. And I thank you for having me tonight.
Before I was a chiropractor, I was in advertising. Kind of followed suit like my mom. But my position when I was in advertising was to make sure that the models and photographers that I dealt with didn't end up flying off cliffs, and that everybody came back okay, and that I made sure things came in on budget, and everybody would be well, and creatively what somebody was envisioning in their head would actually be created. Well, that was wonderful, but it really didn't fulfill me. And I had a really great time, but I was doing that during the 80s, and if everybody remembers advertising in the 80s, it was like this. And it would be about 3 months into a position that you would have, and you'd get a pink slip. Not because you did anything wrong, but they wanted to hire you back as somebody to be freelance, and that can be a little bit rough when you have a lot of expenses and student loans to pay. So it was really funny, because I had started to go to a chiropractor. And the reason why that had happened was I was having problems with asthma. I've had asthma since I was 4 years old. And over the years, sometimes it would get better and sometimes it would get worse. And a couple of times I was even hospitalized for periods of time. Thankfully, I was never intubated, but it got pretty bad. And so after seeing this chiropractor, I was going for quite some time. There was an ongoing thing that they would say to me, you're going to become a chiropractor. And I'm like, yeah, put it on my production schedule. So, but the bottom line is I did. Because when I had been in the hospital the last time, I was in the ICU for 5 days. And part of the reason was I had a reaction to a bad batch of serum from allergy shots. And truly, when you can't breathe, nothing else is going through your mind. And I'm very thankful for emergency medicine. I'm very thankful for the specialists who I had. They all have their time and their place. It's not always first place. And the ICU room nurse who I had told me that when I get out of the hospital, and I will get out, that I needed to go see her chiropractor. And the day that I got out, I had an appointment. He examined me, I had x-rays done, he did my evaluation a little bit later in the afternoon, and he looked at my x-rays and he said, you know, when you were about 4 years old, did you have any type of injury to your neck? And nobody had ever asked me that before. But when I was 4 years old, I fell off a slide. And from that point on, I had a problem with asthma. Nobody else in my family has asthma. Nobody has allergies, okay, except for when the pollen is doing its craziness like it is now. But in saying that, he was able to look at those films, and he was able to adjust me, and I was able to take a deep breath in a way that thousands of dollars and lots of really wonderful specialists were never able to do for me. So, now what do you do? I am frustrated with what I was doing because I was in advertising, and one of the chiropractors who I was there I was rather close with, and he said, you know, there's a conference going on, you should go down and just listen and see what it's about. And I did. And there were a lot of other really incredible synchronicities that happened at that time, because in my life, I never realized the number of chiropractors who I was surrounded by. My best friend's brother and sister were chiropractors. My roommate from college, her cousins were chiropractors. Everywhere I looked, everybody was a chiropractor. Friends of my parents, they were chiropractors. So I went down and I went to this conference, and all of a sudden I found myself in a room of people with like mind. It is an incredible feeling to have that. And because of what some of my belief system was, and still is, yes, medicine has its place, but very often a lot of medicines that are given, sometimes they're overprescribed, and for somebody who's sensitive to certain medications, it doesn't always work quite the same way that you would hope it would. So in saying that, with a lot of the patients who I end up seeing today, I've been very fortunate. I've been in practice I've been in my field since '92. I've had my own practice as well as worked within multidisciplinary practices since '96 in New York as well as Jersey. I've had wellness as well as more pain management, functional medicine kind of practice. And now I'm in private practice here in Jersey. But we're dealing with an epidemic in terms of pain management, or rather, what I would rather say is mismanagement. Because so many people have not necessarily seen the right practitioner, were not necessarily heard in terms of what was going on for them, and sometimes the protocol that was set up for them wasn't necessarily the best choice. And I became a chiropractor because people need to live within their body. People need to have full disclosure of information. And quite honestly, if you can make somebody's quality of life better, why wouldn't you? And the ability to be able to do that with my hands, because even though I have an incredible table that does an awful lot of things, and yes, I do have some other instruments that I sometimes use, if all the electric goes off, I can still use these. After 9/11, I took care of hundreds of first responders with these, because there was no power in New York. So when people think about chiropractors, very often they think only about neck pain, back pain. It's not only about pain. I've also seen an awful lot of people who come to me for wellness, because form follows function. And if you don't get that basic beginning, then nothing else follows. It's kind of like if you have a china cabinet and one of the legs is a little bit short, what happens to everything you put in? It keeps on falling out. And you have a lot of chipped china. But in saying that, you want to make sure that people get the care that they really need. And having taken care of multiple practices, in different parts of New York as well as Jersey as well for colleagues, you sometimes, as you're going through different records, you're seeing where certain choices have been made that maybe they need to look at a different protocol. And that's why they sometimes call me in, because I sometimes see things a little bit differently, and that's how some of my colleagues have come to know. They're like, you know what, can you review this file because I'm not getting the results I need? Maybe you can see this different. And I feel very blessed in that way, because not everybody has some of these incredible doctors referring to them in that way. So one thing that I've really learned is we walk through life with our patients. We've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, but we hopefully see a lot more good. And you know, within practice, I've been able to see in some points of time 4 generations of the same family. I don't think a lot of practitioners can necessarily say that. And I've had the honor and privilege, because I really believe that it's that, to see children as they've come into this world, and I've sometimes had the responsibility and obligation as people have gone out of this world. It is not an easy thing to do. And when it comes to people going into healthcare, because I feel so strongly about that, I've been an adjunct professor for over 15 years. Because the next generation that's coming up, if they don't have a good foundation, I just have to keep on correcting mistakes. And I'm tired of correcting mistakes. And I've seen a lot of them. And some of them it's just the basics because they didn't read something right, or because they didn't take enough time to really know their patient. And some of my patients are kind of funny in the way that they say, you know, I'm lying face down. How do you know it's me? Before I even look at the record? And I'm like, well, I can tell by how your body is lying on the table. And they just, there's a level of comfort that they have because it's not like a mill. You know your patients, and unfortunately today, what ends up happening when you see a lot of practitioners, they want you to be in and out in 7 minutes. That's not my practice, okay? I'm happy to say that I have that ability to decide how long I'm with someone. But you really want to know your patient, and you want to do right by them. And in saying that, you know, I hope that people have a little bit of a better understanding that chiropractic is not only about neck pain, back pain, but it's also about overall health. And you can take care of an awful lot of things when you take care of this vessel that we go through life with. So, on that note, I appreciate all of you. I wish you all good health, and be well and continue to be well.
Please touch them, please take them out, please look at them. You don't have to buy them. That's not why I brought them, so that you can really touch and see what I do. So, I'm going to start. I was very fortunate to grow up with parents who exposed their children to both outlets of creativity and art. We went to museums at a very young age, often dragged. It was not our favorite thing. We wanted to be with our friends. And we also went to art openings in Soho that my father's cousin had, which was really a treat. My mom took me to creative modern dance classes. And during the summer, we took pottery classes, went horseback riding, and basically at home painted anything we could get our hands on and learned to batik and do macrame. Kind of aging myself a little with that one. My photography started very early. When I was about 4, my dad put a huge, heavy 35mm camera in my hand while he stood behind me holding it. He showed me how to take photos, and throughout the years, that began my love of photography. I've lived in New York since graduating college, and I love nearly everything about my city. I'm not blind to the negative, I'm not blind to the empty stores, but I choose to see and appreciate what the beauty of my city has to offer. I normally walk about 3 to 5 miles a day, so I cover a lot of ground and I see a lot that I want to explore. And no matter where I am, I look for the beauty. Whether it's the architecture of an old building and townhouses, or the parks full of flowers, or people on the streets, or the way the sun hits the building, illuminating them to show details you don't see otherwise. Or it could be at the Green Market in Union Square near where I live, which I go to many days a week. When cell phones came out, I was free to snap away at anything that caught my eye and interested me. This is where my photography became a huge part of my life. I honed my skills by trial and error, learning how to best capture what I see. As someone who has always been extremely aware of everything around them, I learned I'm interested in many things most people pass by. It could be a manhole cover, which there are thousands, and they all have beautiful decorative designs. It could be a reflection on buildings of other buildings, or the anatomy of a flower. My friends have called me Wonder Girl. I'm perpetually curious about everything, whether it's a building's ornate facade or my city's history. I'm always doing some research to learn more. I have many I Love New York days, which are spent with friends or by myself, or explore parts of the city I haven't been to or haven't been to in a while. Things are always changing. The produce in the Green Market, the trees, the flowers, the people. These are the things that excite me and make my journey so worthwhile. I chronicle all of them with my iPhone and share what I see on social media. This is how I became enamored with photography and telling stories about what I see. There is much more to taking photos than just the click of a phone. Angles are crucial in capturing what you see in your mind, more than what you see with your eyes. It's sunlight, the direction of the sun, the time of day. It's looking closely. Everything is much more complicated than what you first see. Taking photos means figuring out how to get a shot I see, not only with my eyes, but with what my mind sees. The more I see, the more my photos are robust. These are the photos that are me. And now I'm just going to do a short presentation of my photos. Turn this off. Press the button. Yeah. Okay, and I want to thank Evie Foreman, because if it wasn't for her, I would not have this presentation at all.
Stephanie, you're gonna need the mic while you speak.
You want me to mic? No, you know what I mean? Well, I might need it. Okay, I'll hold on to it.
Roll those eyes at me, child.
I wasn't rolling my eyes.
You were.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, if you want, is it better? Do you see it fine, or do you want the lights dim? Okay, all right, here we go. It's quick. This is Amsterdam. My mother and I went to the Netherlands to see the tulips and to go to museums. We went to the Rijksmuseum, I think 4 times, or I don't know, I stopped counting for hours on end. And of course, indulged in chocolate and in beer while we were there. That's me with an app that is a Van Gogh. I don't like selfies. If anybody sees any of my photos, you will never really see me in front of something or behind something.
Starry night.
It's Starry Night, exactly. Thank you. You're on the ball always.
Thank you.
This is Central Park. I had met a new friend through a friend, and just happened to be walking, and I took this actually as I was walking. And that's what I call that light at the end of the tunnel, which is pretty apropos of our times now. This is Manhattan from Long Island City. I happened to have a date with a friend, and we went to Long Island City, and it happened to be an absolutely glorious day. And I hadn't been to Long Island City in many years. And she and I just, at one point she said to me, I'm gonna take that phone out of your hand because I can't have a conversation with you. I said, I can do two things at once. So anyway, this was a glorious day. That's my city at night. Yes, I worry my parents because I stand in the middle of the street and take these photos. So I do have to make sure the light's red, not that that means anything because cars coming the other way. But yes, sometimes you have to put your life in danger in order to get what you want. Again, 6th Avenue, looking downtown. This is the Flatiron and the Tiffany Clock. Right now, we have scaffolding up around it, which will probably be up for the next 5 or 6 years, so that might be the best you're gonna see it now. This is Washington Square Park near where I live. That's at the Green Market. Some of my friends ask me, where do I find the gargantuan flowers, because they don't see them anywhere. But that's what I see. This townhouse is in the West Village. This was an exhibit that was by the Flatiron, and everyone, of course, was taking it from the front. But I was more interested in the back. So if you see on the left, you see the people taking photos. So I wanted, that was actually my goal, to try and get the Empire State Building, the statue, and the gentleman taking a photo. This one is one of my favorites because that's me, somebody else who's like me, and I wanted to stop him, but I didn't have a chance. There was a reflection in the water on the side of the road on 5th Avenue, and I had actually ran across the street at a red light. I know my parents would be very upset, to catch the sun and the reflection, and he got there first. So I took a picture of him taking a picture of the reflection of the building in the bottom. My photo didn't come out as good as his because he stood there for a while, the sun changed. This is in my neighborhood. I just took this recently. This is a woman who wears fabulous coats and walks back 8 little dogs at a time. So I waved to her, and as she walked by, she gave me the peace sign. So she saw me with my camera, so she was okay with it. But one of the things I try to do, because I don't have permission from people, I try not to take people's faces. I never take children. If I take somebody who's famous, I try to keep them, their privacy as much as possible. So that's just something that I think is very important. This is art walking down the street. I happen to be walking down the street, and I have never seen a piece of art rolling down the street. I've lived in Manhattan my whole life. So the artist is on the right, the assistant, of course, is rolling the art. I just find that one really, really funny. Here's what I talked about, manhole covers. There are hundreds of them. This is a very old one with glass, and there's red and yellow and clear glass. And they're beautiful. And this one has almost a honeycomb. And some of them have the history you can read around them. So yes, I have cataloged about 300 manhole covers. I love nature, thanks to my parents, and love it. I'm also their personal gardener now, and absolutely love it. So nature is always important to me, and I like flowers I like the architecture of flowers. So I don't just look at a flower and say, oh, it's a pretty flower, it's got a nice color. It's the architecture of how it's created that really talks to me. That's the middle of a tulip. That's the middle of a tulip. There are blues, whites, pinks, greens, yellows. Oh, sorry, the rose in there twice. I go to the green market a lot, so I take a lot of, yeah, I have a lot of my fancy when I want to take them all. I've learned a lot about certain produce as time has gone on as well. I take a lot of photos of cauliflower. It's one of the vegetables that architecturally I really, really like, and it's the only vegetable I do not like. This is actually on Old Trenton Road and Dorchester, right across from Elements. There was a cornfield that summer, and I was coming home after a really, really bad storm from Virginia, and it was hailing. And then I got to this, before Village Grand, and I literally, it just all of a sudden appeared like this, and I veered off the road, and there's really nowhere to get off the road. I veered off the road, and I went running across the street, and I just quickly snapped a couple pictures, and then it was gone. That's Oswego, where I went to college, right in Lake Ontario. And this is by the Princeton Junction train station, going to New York. If you go, you don't normally see it, but there's water on the opposite side of where you go to get the train. But you have to climb over some guardrails, and then go down a little bit of a hill.
Sarah's not gonna slip down.
No, I'm very, she knows, I'm very adventurous. I mean, and that's the Village Grand. That was a friend I came across during the pandemic. I stayed here for a while. And this is it. And now the cows are coming home. Till the cows come home. And I will continue to take photos until the cows come home. And this is my cousin, this is actually my cousin's backyard over Thanksgiving a few years ago. And we went out to feed the cows, and all of a sudden, the light had changed, and you just have to, sometimes you have to wait, and I am not a patient person whatsoever. But that's it. Thank you all for listening.